Hello there, everyone. This is Mr. D coming to you with another. Let's see what the camera is right there. With another chapter of Genesis. This is chapter 41, which has to do with Joseph again, and will be found in Genesis, which I call the Holy Chronicles of Genesis. I'm going to do something different, kind of in the mid thing of all of this recording. I forgot one most important thing. I always do ask God for support most of the time. We all try, but I'm going to start having prayer before I do each one of these chapters until I finish all 900 plus in the Old Testament. So Mr. D starts off with, Dear Lord, we ask that you guide us, give me the words to help understand what the history of your people were. Ask to please be with us. And everyone who's having a problem out there, be with them too. Help them to open their eyes and see the love of you. In God's name, amen. As I said, this is in Genesis. This is actually in chapter 41. And it starts off like this. It's kind of interesting how the screen is, how I read everything. I want to make sure that I get the microphone in place of it, but keep the book out of sight, but have enough light because my eyes, are acting up, giving me problems. Maybe it's something I ate. I don't know. Verse 1. When the 2 full years had passed, Pharaoh had a dream. He was standing by the Nile when out of the river there came 7 cows, sleek and fat. How many years was that? Oh, 7. 7 cows came out, all sleek, good. Well, dream continues. They grazed upon the reeds. After them, 7 other cows, ugly and gaunt, came up out of the Nile and stood beside those on the riverbank. And the cows that were ugly and gaunt ate up the 7 sleek and fat cows. Then the Pharaoh woke up. Wow, I can imagine that must have been a freaky nightmare to have that happen and not to know what it's all about. Well, you know what? The Pharaoh worked on this part. He fell asleep again and had a second dream. 7 heads of grain, healthy and good, were growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads of grain sprouted, thin and scorched by the east winds. Then the thin heads of the grain swallowed up the 7 healthy, full heads. Then the Pharaoh woke up again. It had been a dream. Whew. In the morning, his mind was troubled. In the morning, his mind was troubled, so he sent for all the magicians. Where am I? He sent for all the magicians and wise men in Egypt to help him understand this, What was this dream all about? Well, they say here in verse 9, he said, well, not actually, it's not. It's verse 8. In the morning, his mind was troubled, so he sent all his magicians and wise men of Egypt, pharaohs, told them his dream, but no one could interpret them for him. Then the chief cupbearer said to the Pharaoh, oh my goodness, this must be the cupbearer from the previous chapter, where he was in prison and Joseph answered one of his dreams. And he just kind of, I guess, forgot about him. But now this cupbearer is come forward to the Pharaoh, and he said, da, da, da. We got to go up, I guess. Yeah, there it is. Verse 9. Then the chief cupbearer said to the Pharaoh, today I am reminding of my shortcomings. Pharaoh was once angry with his servants, and he imprisoned me and the chief baker in the house of the captain's guard. Each of us had a dream the same night, and each dream had a meaning of its own. Now a young Hebrew was there with us, a servant of the captain of the guard. We told him our dreams, and he interpreted them for us, giving each man the interpretation of his dream. And things turned out exactly as he interpreted them to us. I was restored to my position, and the other man was impelled. They didn't want to be the impelled, but it was kind of nice to get out. And Joseph answered those dreams of theirs. Remember, that was in chapter 40. Don't if you didn't get it, you need to go back and maybe listen to it. Okay. So the Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothing, he came before the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream, and no one can interpret it. But I have heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I can't do it, Joseph replied to the Pharaoh. But God will give the Pharaoh the answer of his desires. Then the Pharaoh sent, and then the Pharaoh said to Joseph, in my dream, I was standing on the bank of the Nile, when out of the river there came up 7 cows, fat and sleek, and they grazed among the reeds. After them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny, very ugly cows that came up first. Let's read that again. After them, 7 other cows came up, scrawny and very ugly and lean. I had never seen such ugly cows in all the land of Egypt. The lean, ugly cows ate up all the 7 fat cows that came up first. But even after they have ate them, no one could tell that they had done so. They looked just as ugly as before. Then I woke up. Oh, it's terrible nightmares like that. You wake up and you're just like, wow. God talks to us at night with dreams. And also, don't forget, this could have been bad, but, Satan tries to get inside of our heads too. But it wasn't. It was God. This is written down as fact that Joseph was brought before the Pharaoh. And Joseph, with the power of God only, he's to try to interpret it, this dream. Well, it says here, I think it's verse 22. In my dream, I saw 7. No, wait. There were 8. It just, okay, yeah. As it's still the Pharaoh talking to Joseph. In my dream, I saw 7 heads of grain, full and good, growing on a single stalk. After them, 7 other heads sprouted, withered, thin, and scorched by the east wind. The thin heads of the grain swallowed up the 7 good heads. I told this to the magician, but none of them could explain it to me. I'm sure the Pharaoh was really confused. He has all these top-notch magicians, soothers, telling him what's going on. But that's Satan working in the background. trying to change the world to his side. And he was doing a good job. A lot of countries really don't respect and honor God and what God was or is to them. They forget and they go into their own worlds. They create their own nation, their own tribes. But right now we're studying from the beginning on up, from the start of Adam and Eve. So, what is this dream that this Pharaoh is so confused about? Let's see where we go. Verse 25. After the magicians could not answer the question. And then Joseph said to the Pharaoh, it sounds like he has an answer. And Joseph said to the Pharaoh, the dreams of the Pharaoh are one and the same. God has revealed to the Pharaoh what he is about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years. Of 7 good heads of grain are 7 years. It is one of the same dream. The 7 lean, ugly cows that came afterwards ate 7 years. And so are the 7 worthless heads of the grains scorching by the east, by the wind on the east. They are 7 years of famine. Wow. 7 years of good growth and 7 years of bad growth. Those could be important dreams, you know. Those could be important dreams. So in verse 37, the plan seemed good to the Pharaoh and as all his officials. I skipped something here. Remember, I made a comment that on 29, it said there, and God will do it soon. That's the problem sometimes with my eyes. Here it goes. And now as the Pharaoh looks at his discern of the wise men and put him on charge of the land of Egypt, let the Pharaoh appoint a commissioner over the land to take a fifth of the harvest of Egypt during the 7 grains under the authority of the Pharaoh, to be kept in the city for food. This food should be held and reserved for the country to be used during the 7 years of famine that will come upon Egypt, so that the country may not be ruined by the famine. That sounds like a pretty solid dream. To have someone control that grain. The dream talk about 7 good years and 7 bad years. And the grain being already produced in the first 7 years may help with the second 7 years. So, and it says here, verse 37, the plan seemed good to the Pharaoh and all his officials. So the Pharaoh asked them, can we find anyone like this man, one whom is the Spirit of God? The Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has made all this known to you, there is no one so discerning and wise as you. You shall be in charge of my palace, and all my people are to submit to your order. Only with the respects to the throne will be the greater than you. So that means the Pharaoh is the only one higher. Joseph's kind of really made himself get all the way up to the top. Maybe it was destiny of God to have his brothers throw him in that pit when he had the many colors, and then have all those merchants and people traveling across the desert go to Egypt and sell him, and for him to end up in a prison because of his master's wife. And then one of those people in prison that he meets helps him get to the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh is now learning about something very important, a famine that's coming. and how the country can survive it. So, what happens? Well, we continue with verse 441. And it says, so the Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then the Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in his robes and fine linen and put golden chains around his neck. He had him ride in the chariots as his second in command, and people shouted before him, make way. Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then the Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, but without your word, no one will lift hand or foot in all of Egypt. Pharaoh gave Joseph the name, well, again, this is a little hard name. The Pharaoh called Joseph the name Zaphnath Penah and gave him Asenatha, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On, to be his wife. And Joseph went throughout the land of Egypt. So he marries, it looks like an Egyptian, you know? Yeah, I think he becomes Egyptian because he gives his Asenath's daughter, Potipharah. That was verse 45, if you're interested in seeing how it should really read. But we're going into now verse 46. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of the Pharaoh king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the Pharaoh's presence and traveled throughout Egypt. During the 7 years of abundance, the land produced plentiful. Joseph collected all the food produced in those 7 years of abundance in Egypt and stored them. Yeah, see here. And stored it in the cities. In each city, he put food grown in the field surrounding it. Joseph stored up huge quantities of grain like the sand of the sea. It was so much that he stopped keeping record because it was beyond measure. Before the years of the famine came, two sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of, was born to Joseph by Asenath. You remember that was his wife. The daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. Joseph named his firstborn Manasseh and said, it is because God has made me forget all my trouble and all my father's household. The second son, he named him Ephraim and said, it is because God has made me fruitful in the land of my suffering. His suffering being the land that his brothers threw him into, Egypt. And look what has happened, as I said, from a servant of his master, and that was, I forget names, It was, I was back in chapter, looks like chapter 39. Yeah, Potiphar's wife. And then he went from there to the prison, and then up to the Pharaoh, to where now he's in charge of helping Egypt survive a famine that's getting ready to happen. So we continue. Verse 53. The 7 years of the abundance in Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began, just as Joseph had said. There was famine in all the other lands, but in the whole land of Egypt there was food. When all Egypt began to feel the famine, the people cried to the Pharaoh for food. Then the Pharaoh told all the Egyptians, go to Joseph and do what he tells you. When the famine had spread over the whole country, Joseph opened up all the storehouses and said grain and sold grain to the Egyptians. For the famine was severe throughout Egypt, and the word came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe everywhere. That must have been a bad time for Egypt. That famine spreading all over the country. Well, that's our chapter 41. I hope that you come to chapter 42. And remember, there's only 50 chapters in Genesis. Then we'll start another book. I'm not sure which book yet, but I have a feeling it'll probably be the next one because I really like the next book of the Bible, Exodus. You know, that's it. That's a very important part in our Christian history. Some important things happened there that are very important, you know, in our life. Now, we continue on to say, I'm looking at the book for a second, that, yeah, we're going to be going into 42. But it has a little thing here. It says here, do not fear the unknown. Only God knows the future. The best way to prepare for whatever lies ahead is to stick close to him. Stick close to who? I would imagine stick close to God. Stay in focus of his love, his care. Listen, feel him. It's important. So don't forget to mark my button, the subscribe button. And I guess we'll see you in the next chapter with Joey chapter 42. May God be with you, Mr. D.